To whom this may concern, whatever you do, do not pursue a career with TRAFIGURA. We are two former employees of this company and decided to come forth and share our experiences. First off, I'd like to start with why we are doing this. The other day, I saw an article in the news explaining positive progress at TRAFIGURA, but at what cost? Well, from a behind-the-scenes point of view, we are here to share our stories as an employee, but also the damage this company has caused to the world around us. So without further delay, here we are. I worked with TRAFIGURA from 2002 to 2011 when I had ultimately had enough. My time started well, although it was quite hard to fit into the working environment as it was a very steep learning curve. There was a lot of pressure to do well, which is expected in any job. However, there seemed to be no reward for success. When new deals were made, the employer simply gave an okay and moved on. Obviously, this makes it harder to want to do well. In addition, the whole work environment was quite unorganized, scrambling from place to place. Although I am back in Canada now, I lived in Brazil from 2002 to 2009 and China from 2009 to 2011. The job was very strenuous, offering the opportunity to move halfway across the world or walk away. If one chose not to move, obviously they'd be let go. Upon greeting many colleagues, I have learned that this was the case with them too. In 2011, I finally had enough, and I was not enjoying life at all, finding it very hard to develop a social or family life, whilst constantly worried about having to move again. I couldn't take this unstable life anymore, and therefore I have decided to resign and look for work elsewhere.
I have a slightly similar story to Matt, yet different in certain aspects. I worked for TRAFIGURA from 2007 to 2010 when I was suddenly let go. I had no warning whatsoever and was simply told one morning upon arriving that there was no longer a need for my position and I was to start looking for another job as I'd be let go within the next month. Obviously, this came with great stress. At the time, I was living in India and had no backup plan. I moved back to Canada and received very little compensation. This was a huge inconvenience as I had to go on a job search once again with no source of income and having to pay for necessary needs. That's my story of TRAFIGURA, and it certainly isn't a pleasant one.
After hearing our stories, know that our cases are not unique. This has happened many different times to many different people. When examining the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, where do we draw the line? This company clearly violates the codes for cultural, social, economic, and civil rights. So, is this really a company you want to work for? I don't think so.
In 2006, there was a toxic waste dump that occurred in Abidjan on the Ivory Coast. This dump was not only detrimental to the surrounding environment, but also to the Ivorians. The first of the waste was offloaded in August of 2006, but the dumping continued for almost 3 weeks before the population came to understand what was happening in their own country.
The gas caused by the dumping of said chemicals is blamed not only by the government of Côte d'Ivoire, but also by the UN for the deaths of 17 Ivorians and the injury of over 30,000. These injuries ranged from mild headaches to severe burns of the lungs and skin. Almost 100,000 citizens sought medical attention for the effects of these chemicals.
When confronted, TRAFIGURA did not admit to their wrongdoing. Instead, they claimed that what had been dumped was simply slops, or in other words, wastewater from the Provo Koala, which is one of the company's numerous ships, fuel tanks. This was a bold-faced lie, as the same year, an inquiry within the Netherlands revealed that in actuality, the substance was more than 500 tons of a mix containing caustic soda, fuel, and hydrogen sulfide, not fuel tank residue. So why did TRAFIGURA choose to dump this toxic waste? Well, the disposal would have cost 500,000 euros in Mordite compared to the 18,500 euros it cost them to dump in Abidjan through the company Compagnie Tommy, which just so happens to have been registered a few days before the Provo Koala arrived.
In 2007, TRAFIGURA paid $198 million to the Ivorian government in order to help with the cleanup. The Ivorian government had no choice but to agree to not prosecute the company, as without the $198 million, there is no way the government would have sufficient funds in order to pay for the cleanup themselves. Despite paying the government to keep quiet, TRAFIGURA continues to deny any wrongdoing and claimed that they did not know the substance was disposed improperly.
TRAFIGURA even commissioned the Minton report in order to determine the toxicity of the waste, and when this information was leaked to the media, one of TRAFIGURA's lawyers successfully obtained a super injunction that essentially bans the newspaper The Guardian from publishing the Minton report for the public. In addition, TRAFIGURA threatened numerous other media organizations with legal activity if they were to publish the Minton report.
What did the Minton report include? Well, it stated that sodium hydroxide, thiols, coke or naphtha, and many other harmful substances were most likely present in the toxic waste that was dumped. In addition, it stated that potential health effects include burns to the skin, eyes and lungs, diarrhea, vomiting, loss of consciousness, and even death. TRAFIGURA essentially admitted that the waste they dumped in the Ivory Coast was consistent of the injuries of the people. They then claimed the Minton report was preliminary and was in fact inaccurate.
The BBC also removed their story, Dirty Tricks and Toxic Waste in the Ivory Coast, and its video from their website. The story included interviews with the victims of the dumpings as well as the relatives of children who had died from the effects of the waste. The BBC also stated that TRAFIGURA had ruined the country simply in order to make a profit. 5 days later, the BBC apologized for the report and withdrew any allegations about the correlation between Trafigura and death on the Ivory Coast. Simultaneously, they stated that dumping of Trafigura's hazardous waste had in fact led to the oil trader being forced to pay a total of $30 million in compensation to the many victims and refused to remove this statement.
So what were the repercussions of their actions? Yes, they caused the deaths of 17 people, injured 100,000, and harmed the environment, but the negative effects don't stop here. Once the press, as well as the government, realized the extent of the injuries to these people, the transitional government of Prime Minister Charles Conan-Banny resigned after only 9 months.
It's evident that Trafigura was not taking into account the consequences of their actions and the detrimental effects they could have on the surrounding environment.
So what can Trafigura do to solve these problems? The current outstanding problems are both employee-related and environmental issues. Trafigura first needs to shift their mindset towards employees and away from profit. The treatment of employees is not okay and must be dealt with first. Trafigura must start by hiring employees more spread out throughout the world. This will solve 2 major problems, which are the inconvenience of relocation and being forced to work long hours. Second, the company must look into better employee benefits and treatment. Based on personal experience, working at Trafigura can be very unorganized and worrisome. The thought of minimal job security is quite scary, and losing a job can come with little to no warning. This job has become known as a hire and fire job, which is obviously not a great nickname to possess. Employee treatment should be taken into consideration, as employee happiness is greatly linked with company success. Naturally, happier employees will create a happier work environment.
It is necessary for Trafigura to ensure that all of the toxic waste and its remains have been removed and safely disposed of, therefore aiding to ensure that the community is not subject to any further damage than what has already been done. In addition, Trafigura needs to compensate all of the people affected by their negligence. The £30 million that Trafigura did pay only went to a total of 30,000 Ivorians affected by the toxic waste. That's only £1,000 per person. However, the funds were in fact misappropriated by a group that claimed to represent the victims, leaving approximately 6,000 people without any compensation. Even for those who did receive compensation, it was not sufficient for many of the victims given the severity of their situation. This leaves 76,000 people who received nothing in compensation from Trafigura, and this needs to be corrected as soon as possible. Trafigura should hire a well-respected organization to go to the Ivory Coast and evaluate the areas affected by the toxic waste, then distribute compensation accordingly. The victims within the areas that were hit the hardest shall receive the highest amount of compensation, and the victims with the areas who were not as severely affected would receive a lower amount. After the victims have been appropriately compensated, Trafigura should use their resources in order to help rebuild the affected communities in consultation with the Ivorians and their needs. This may include many things such as building schools to help educate children and therefore boosting the country's future economy. In addition, providing safe water for the citizens that will help ensure the health of the current and future population. Creating roads would help to develop infrastructure and allow growth of the local economy. Employment and education would then become possible given the ease of transportation to local schools and villages where it was not possible beforehand. Lastly, Trafigura should create a slush fund. The slush fund will be available in order to help rectify future and unforeseen outcomes of the prior actions that may not be visible at this time. Trafigura, things need to change.
We've provided you with some solutions. Should you choose to take them, you may be able to redeem your reputation and help countless people in the process. If you do not listen to our recommendations, be prepared for the worst.
Should you care to learn more and see what you can do to help the Ivorians and put a stop to Trafigura, please visit stoptrafigura.webs.com. In addition, use our hashtag StopTrafigura2016 and get the word out.